See, being creative and not understanding what creativity really is, sets a person up for a lot of suffering. The reason is very simple that creativity isn't about ego. Creativity is something that happens experientially independent of the person. When you wake up and you open your eyes and you see the three-dimensional rendition of reality that you think is out there, the creative person like me has a secondary version of that I didn't understand this until this last year, that I had to go deep to really try to understand why I kept having such problems in my life. How could I start jobs and start transforming things and doing things that are objectively good? How could I create products with the highest level of physics and induction science? How could I create so many things that would be easily and objectively identified as not just viable, but transformative in nature if people had the integrity to simply look at them and evaluate them on the merits of the physics involved, or even be curious about it? And why would it be the case that when I showcase things that would represent breakthroughs in volumetric efficiency, or take the entire platform of root space superchargers to a threshold that has never been achieved? You see, even saying that is going to cause people to doubt the realities around it. But see, what they don't understand is that the creative mind of someone like me is a secondary reality where when I look at things, images, vivid, visual, and experiential information forms effortlessly. And the main thing that makes this such a challenge is that creative people often come up in an education system that identifies them for their anomaly. They think that they have attention problems, but it is actually the attention of everyone not like that is abnormal. That we have not even confronted the pathology of modern human existence, a species hell bent on self annihilation, where ignorance is public policy, where we can't avoid war or generating technologies that have actually created the end of life itself to be a possibility that is not just going to be something of natural causes, like a volcano or an asteroid, but simply the ignorance of the people that we call leaders today. And so creativity does not come from ego. Creativity can be influenced by ego, but the context of some people may just be to make a difference. And so some children have a very difficult time because they're emotionally affected by things that look unjust, things that make them sad. And they have to develop coping, because what happens is the sharing of those ideas or being identified as an anomaly. It's like being a different species. It's sort of like if you watch Cesar Millan and he brings in a maladjusted dog and all the dogs just unknowingly have a problem. You see, people will not know why they don't like you. People will form feelings associated with you listening to you talk. That people who lack creativity live in a subjective reality of analyzing, because creative people don't have to analyze the same way because they observe things and understand them. And so the analyzing that constitutes the vast majority of people's pseudo intellect, they fail to realize that the human brain is so powerful that it transcended the capacity of the human body in such totality that a human being extended their body with things like wings, and now they fly, or scuba gear, or a Formula One car. And so while decisions can be made at the speed of electrons as it pertains to the movement through space and time, a fighter jet, for example, compare a fighter jet and the processing power required for a brain compared to that of a human being running in a straight line. The amount of cognitive abilities of the brain enabled us to even generate a secondary form of intelligence and consciousness called the imagination, where we can see profound patterns of behaviors in animals and take something like a wolf and literally using genetics breed it into a dog that we could train to herd sheep, or to discover the relationship between a seed and a plant and create agriculture, or harness the power of fire, or extend the power of our eyeball with a microscope or telescope or electron microscope, or to visualize things like atoms and electrons, using math to explain things that are not even visible to the eye, and generate, 3-mile long particle accelerators to take protons to the speed of light to collide them with each other, to use instrumentation to try to capture subatomic particles in the form of energy, to be able to use mathematics to describe the expansion of a universe. And so in a world where someone like Sir Isaac Newton can create the entire field of, something like, physics or calculus. I think he created calculus by himself within 7 months, and yet the average person with a PhD is merely a parrot compared to someone like that. But you see, in a world of consumption and consumerism, children are then indoctrinated to bifurcate themselves from the imagination, and severing the connection between words and experiential phenomenon would think that memorizing things and regurgitating them on a test with no emotional connection, with no passion, with no curiosity, merely to validate egos. Now you have a world where success is absent talent, where people try to reduce their exposure to risk by putting forth less effort to try to get more return on investment, where the curiosity about the world has been replaced by the indoctrination of consumption and more, where the unchecked egos are literally going to destroy the planet. And people with the highest level of pathology are the most likely to aspire to leadership. People with antisocial personality disorder, psychopathy, and narcissists make up the majority of presidents, politicians, and people at the head of corporate entities, because they're driven merely to aspire to try to acquire more power and more power. And they arbitrarily will send us to war over the sadism of simply putting themselves in the history books. And as we hand over launch codes to these types of people and they hold us hostage, they've invented a nice little education system that trains you into validation seekers that have been severed from your own imagination. And imagination is now part of the DSM-5. That an increase in imagination that could represent a breakthrough can actually put you in a mental hospital, where changes in your behavior due to revelations about the nature and architecture of the reality of the experience of being human is something that is considered dangerous. That there's a reason they shoot the Martin Luther Kings and the Jesuses, because there are human beings, many of them now, that have discovered the truth. But you see, the truth is something that violates psychology. That psychology is now the equivalent of the Catholic Church during the Inquisition, a claim monopoly over the mental well-being of all people, with a field of study that is purely subjective, and today's psychologist has no efficacy whatsoever, does not even have a higher percentage of success in relationships, likely much worse in relationships. And here's a person with no mastery over their own mind that literally has an ego-based attachment to the righteousness of knowledge that they are not even the author of. And people have lost the ability to even participate in Socratic learning. And you could look at people debate, where people debate as entitled in righteousness with no absolute objectivity, where objectivity is now gone entirely, where it's us versus them, left versus right, north versus south, east coast, west coast, build a wall, gender issues, relationship problems, the problem with modern women, the problem with modern men, terrorists, Zionists, imperialists. And everybody's got to straw man somebody else simply to maintain dominion over their population. And as you regurgitate what you saw on the Sunday news, thinking that those are issues that are really important today, like what type of clothing someone wears before sitting on a toilet, or whether or not in 2024 a woman should have the rights to her own body, or whether or not the skin color or national origin of a person or a child is going to somehow impact your level of compassion for them, where you could just simply say the name of a country, which is nothing but a word and a document, and that human being now is no longer a person of concern to you, where it's not a human being, it's collateral damage, or unfortunately is part of a terrorist state. And so as we simply drink the Kool-Aid of dehumanizing nonsensical rhetoric as the primary basis of our worldviews and divide ourselves up conveniently into blocks of voters that they can study, you'll fill out polling data because they'll tell you your opinion matters. And your opinion does matter because when you tell them your opinion, now they'll know what to have their politicians tell you on television. And so we've been indoctrinated so heavily that the human beings in the United States represent the highest level of cognitive dissonance and ignorance humanly possible. Can't even be trusted to go onto YouTube without coming out a flat earther. And so people are indoctrinated into fear because they're unaware of the neurological implications of fear. That fear fueled by adrenaline includes tunnel vision, a cognitive blockade, and the suffering that you see on television is something that causes a continual shrinkage of your own moment-to-moment awareness, where underneath the veneer of your choice to pursue the nothingness of more, choosing to pursue the aspirations of me over you, within you is a growing swell of concern, a growing pain, sadness, and angst that is unnatural. That thou shalt not kill was a practical guide for people that wanted to attain peace in this lifetime. That you cannot dehumanize a single human being and be a human yourself. That you cannot differentiate yourself. That if you can't see yourself in the eyes of any baby around this whole planet, if you can look at a baby and think that that baby deserves to die just based on where it was born, if you want to believe that we can't have peace, if you can't grapple with the intellectual challenges of finding ecological balance, if you really believe that petroleum is the only way for us to have energy, where we're going to have to necessitate the destruction of life in order for us to continue to spend 99% of our fuel driving around billboards of ignorance and planned obsolescence, that you don't believe that there is anything other than yes or no, black and white, right and wrong. You see, the decision-making apparatus of the human ego that is at the source of everything inhuman about our current structures of government, leadership, and society in general represents a profound bifurcation from reality, that the subjective realities of people thinking that there's 8 billion different versions of what's going on in one single three-dimensional universe is the problem. That is the Tower of Babel. That is your entitlement to your yellow brick road, where you think your someday future is really important, that you need to prove yourself, fix yourself, change, grow, where you turn your backs on people based on your perception of their success as you step over the homeless that got spit off the treadmill of consumption, as you look at people like women and rate them based on their perceived capacity to give you pleasure or make you look like you're a better man because you have a more attractive women. And now we worried about giving Barbie dolls to little girls, but then we had to invent plastic surgery so they can become better and better and better, so they could attract those provider men and go take pictures on yachts. And so as you sold your soul to the someday future, the promises of the happiness, you fail to realize that the pursuit of me is the cause of your suffering, the cause of the inhumanity, the cause of the subconscious, where your soul exists, where the higher self is really the total sum of consciousness and cognitive processes that has been relegated outside the boundaries of your momentary awareness in the same physiological phenomenon that caused the temporary tunnel vision of an animal is what created the ego. The first semblance of artificial intelligence was when the profound and gifted powers of the human imagination were given language. Language is the cause of all suffering. I think, therefore I am. See, if you think you're broken and you try to fix yourself, you propagate the lie of your brokenness, that you validate as you attempt to fix and change something that is not even there. That the me that you think is there, that is so important, is an illusion of your imagination. That you were represented in the view of life from your vantage point. That present moment awareness is a restoration of normal consciousness shared by all living things. That animals don't have complex decisions simply because they make choices based on the observation of the moment they live within. And human beings have the same power, but you see, the emotions that are normally there to contextualize reality and protect you from deception, protect you, are now causing you to suffer and force others to suffer. Why? Because as you recall fears of failure, rejection, abandonment, and project that onto other people and hold them accountable for the same emotional states that you've been stuck living within since you were 5 years old, well, you demonize people, and then you become easy to be manipulated because you want out of the suffering so bad that all they have to do is tell you they're making America great, or Obama said we're going to change, or we're going to make Black Lives Matter again. And then he took the Black Lives Matter right to Roger Goodell and Jay-Z, and now he's balling out of control. And so as we create victim movements to try to emulate the reality of the civil rights movements of yesterday, the system has gotten stronger at stomping out anybody that wants to tell you the truth. And while you know that there's something wrong, you inappropriately turn to conspiracy, because the conspiracies are literally staring you right in the face when you look in the mirror, because you're the conspiracy. The conspiracy is me. The conspiracy is a segregation between you and the world outside. Instead of listening to people, you're distracted by a voice in your head that transforms everything they say to you to look for its relevance in your own identity, in your own rejections, in your own fears of being identified as a failure. And so as you listen to yourself analyze and dissociate yourself from reality itself, you are propagating the very darkness. And there isn't a revolution coming that requires bullets. There isn't a revolution coming that requires war. The only revolution that will ever make a difference is a revolution of the human spirit, a revelation towards the true nature of the gift of life, that everybody was created in the likeness. Everybody. And the people that have dared to tell you about it are the ones that have gotten bludgeoned for their efforts to make a difference. And every time I've been broken, I find out something new about myself. And the more that I find out about myself, the more I'm hated, the more I deviate, the more I'm weird, the crazier I look, because I have emotions in a world where a man is not supposed to cry, that you're supposed to suppress yourself to be strong. Why? So you don't get embarrassed? Because you're cowering? Because you're too weak to handle the reality of your own experience simply being communicated naturally? That emotions as temporary phenomenons simply contextualize your experience so that another human being would be able to create an accurate rendition of the world from your point of view. But the empathy that would be a superpower for you is gone. as you analyze and project yourself onto people, as you make presumptions to shortcut the process of actually understanding, as you walk around thinking that your arbitrary beliefs about reality have somehow rearranged every molecule from now to the beginning of time to align with your entitled righteousness, a need to dogmatically protect your yellow brick road to the fantasy future that constitutes your deal with the devil, a future of being healed, a future of having proven yourself, a future of more, a future of love, the love that's missing because you're not quite enough for it yet. You don't quite trust it yet because you believe there's something wrong with you. And the only way you're going to overcome it is through agreement and consensus, approval and validation seeking. And so as you put all your eggs in the validation basket and refuse to take a look at the world around you, you are the sheep amongst the wolves. And you've been warned. And sin, well, sin leads to hell. And if you're suffering at all, if you feel like there's just something wrong, if you can't quite get there, if your life is a twilight zone, spinning on a treadmill of endless invalidation, well, that's hell. Hell is the inescapable paradigm of I'm not enough, I gotta be good enough, a someday future to live into, to overcome the resignation of today. You need it in someday, because if you had to look in the mirror and see who you were today, and if that's going to get you there, you already know the answer. And so you have to create a someday to create hope to offset the profound feelings of fear and abandonment that dominate every wakeful moment of your life. And as you listen to the voice of deception that told you that was a soulmate and then left you on the ground in the fetal position, well, you have to start to question the merits of emotions that make human beings the only species that experience abandonment as adults. Emotional needs that you've been indoctrinated to think need to be met through consumption, through finding a soulmate, through relationships. The only species that can't make a relationship work without needing medical interventions or therapists to be a referee to help you understand your triggers and theirs, where you take all the responsibility of adulthood and displace it to the child you used to be because your daddy and mommy didn't love you enough. Well, I'm sorry if your daddy didn't go to your t-ball games. But if you look at nature, an animal that escapes the clutches of a lion is happy. And you made it out of your childhood scarred somehow. Interesting. And so your fear of rejection, having you sit on the sidelines of life, how would that really work for the cheetah? How would nature handle your emotions? Would an animal even survive if it walked around fearing failure and abandonment, seeking a comfort zone and the approval of everyone else as the only way to feel like life is worth living? Do you think that the way that you experience life is really the ultimate? Or do you think maybe there's something more? Interesting.